UC to nearby Cedars-Sinai Medical Center.
And the paramedics put me on code red and blue right to Cedars-Sinai, where Dr. Lauren Hooten did brain surgery for an hour, 2 hours. He told me if I was 3 minutes late, it wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be live.
Suffered a very severe traumatic brain injury, as well as some bony fractures as well. He had a fracture of the back, the low back, and of the pelvis. But the most devastating injury was the brain injury.
And it was a real hard time, you know, and from then on it started the process of, well, your dad's not going to make it more than 72 hours, and if he does, he'll be a vegetable.
Probably 50% of people who have this kind of injury do die. Only 20% do well, and probably only 10% return to work the way he has.
Gary still has no memory of the 6 weeks he spent in the hospital. But he does remember crossing over to another reality.
You know, on the other side, there's no distance, time, or space. I could have been there for 3 days, 3,000 years, or 3 seconds. It's all the same.
Right after being released from the hospital, Busey insisted his views hadn't changed about helmet laws. But a year after facing death, Busey sang a different tune.
I have a 17-year-old son who's an expert motocross dirt bike rider. And he's made me very aware of helmets. From ages 16 to 21 or 25, they should be mandatory.
Busey suffered no brain damage from his head injuries, but he's still Hollywood's go-to guy for wild men and offbeat characters.
Yeah! But the point in life is it's so precious, it's so short on Earth, and it's so sweet. Good talking to you.
Whoever told me this kind of experience. And that is the exact...
Did you disbelieve it as a medical doctor?
I wondered if it was caused by the various medications that we had given her, or perhaps caused by a lack of oxygen.
Now, how do you know
brain.
it wasn't?
I went ahead and I did my own study of that exact topic. I have interviewed well over 100 children who have a lack of oxygen to the brain, who are treated with all kinds of medicines, who also are mechanically ventilated and in scary intensive care units, but were not near death. None of them had this experience.
You're trained medically, right? You know that tissues die, cells die. How do you buy all this? How do you explain it to yourself with your own training?
It's very difficult to explain from a medical standpoint. Remember, when patients lapse into coma, that should wipe clean the slate of consciousness.
Correct.
Comatose patients should not be dreaming, should not be having hallucinations. In Crystal Merzlock's case, her pupils were fixed and dilated, meaning, you know, that what I was always trained was that there was no brain activity. And yet she could accurately describe everything I was doing to her. She said, I saw you put a tube in my nose. I saw you take me into another room where you put me into a machine that looked like a donut, which was her description of a CAT scanner. It's clear that at the point of dying, some other neurological abilities or capabilities or something take a person.
You're not, listen, this body is something that you use as a modality, as a way to move in the physical environment. I sat and watched them work on my body. Everybody, this is standard out-of-the-body experiences.
So therefore, you know you go on to something else after this,
you
out
know
of this
that
body.
This system that was created for you to function in this environment, but this is not you. You're in here because when you are freed from your body, and mine was such an enormous, the pain and the freedom and the expansiveness of the other side, then you know automatically you're separate from it, so it's a whole other science.
How can how can you see their own body when you no longer have a functioning brain to process visual images, you no longer have a functioning retina? Many times these patients' eyes are taped closed.
It's got to be something else, right? Got to be, doctor.
How can how can you see their own body when you no longer have a functioning brain to process visual images, you no longer have a functioning retina? Many times these patients' eyes are taped closed.
It's got to be something else, right? Got to be, doctor.
I'm a nurse. I had a friend that was a patient, did not believe in the hereafter, did not believe life after death was nothing. When you die, you die. Well, one night, there was an emergency down in 502. And upon getting there, it was my friend, and he was now in cardiac arrest. So immediately, I started to thump. It was my job to start working on his chest. Within a few minutes, the cardiac monitor showed that he was in a systole. Well, now, I looked up at this point and said, I wonder if you believe me now, you pineapple. And soon he was revived. Went to ICU, was on a monitor for a while, was later said to me, "Oh, Mary, I'm sorry. I saw you looking up at me. I knew you were talking to me."
I have been totally blind since shortly after my birth due to too much oxygen in the incubator, destroying the optic nerve. And I had a clinical death experience February 2nd of 1973 in which I was able to see, and I went sailing up through the roof of the hospital, and then I saw lights out on the street and buildings and everything like that, and I was in essence cavorting through the air and really enjoying the liberty that I felt, because I'd never been able to get around like that before.
I was struck by lightning in 1970.
The greatest thing was being on stage and having the control, the awe of being worshipped, and having folks just really look at you and say, wow, you know, I want to be that.
As leader of a heavy metal band, Kirk Martin projected an angry, wild image on stage.
And getting just thousands of people to scream profanities, that was the biggest rush for me.
Off stage, people just found him mean.
I was so filled with hate that I would project that hate in a lot of people. Two of the band members, when we were on the road, just decided they were just sick of me and they couldn't take me anymore. And they actually decided to leave the band.
But the message in Kirk's music captured the minds of his young audience.
My whole intention was to tell people to believe in yourself, follow your own visions, your own dreams, and crush whoever's in your way.
Kirk had no illusions about where his growing success came from.
I got on the ground and I clawed the earth. I told Satan, I said, if you give me what I want, if you make me a god, if you give me the women and the drugs and the fame and everything, and you give me the power to crush people, I will serve you until the end of time. Within 2 days, I was offered a recording contract.
While Kirk pushed for fame and fortune, he tried to keep a secret bottled up inside.
A couple of older boys in the neighborhood started molesting me and sodomizing me when I was probably about 8. It happened more than once, and I never talked about it. I never told anybody about it.
Later, taking advantage of women sexually became part of Kirk's heavy metal lifestyle.
The worst part about my molestation was the fact that I, in turn, went out and violated others.
Then, just as he was about to sign the record deal for which he'd sold his soul, he had an encounter with a mysterious stranger.
One morning at about 9 o'clock, I went into a small cafe, and this guy came and sat down right across from me. Out of all the places he could have sat, there were plenty of seats open. And immediately I looked at him with this horrible, mean-looking look on my face, and I said, "What's happening, Dad?" And he stopped stirring his coffee again and looked at me right in the face, and he said, "What's happening, Dad?" I jumped across the table and I put my nose right up to his, stared him in the eye, and I just cursed him. I called him every foul thing I could think of. And he said, "God sent me here to tell you that he loves you. And God wants you to know that he was not responsible for the young men that molested you when you were a young child." And the thing that was so mind-blowing about that is he used their names.